There's one area of banking right now that is really touching every element of the financial institution in different ways, and that is cloud technology. It's interesting how quickly people have started to implement the cloud and use it in different ways for their institution. There's probably as many equations as in how organizations are using it and the type of cloud they're using as there are financial institutions out there. But nothing is more important today because of the amount of data, the amount of insight, the amount of speed that we have in the marketplace to have to achieve the things we used to have to achieve just with a back office platform. While the cloud is important, and it's interesting because WSO2 in a research they did found that 87% of financial institutions today are implementing the cloud in some form or fashion. Now, that tends to be more toward large institutions and small institutions, but I've visited a lot of institutions lately of all sizes that have cloud technology and cloud implementations on their to-do list, or they're going and already doing it. Now, what's interesting is while all these institutions are at different stages of deployment, the industry as a whole feels that they're at a low maturity level. Now, what that means is while organizations may be implementing cloud in their organization today, they feel they still are at the beginning stages of this. They're also implementing it in all different areas of the financial institution, from security to customer experience. Now, one reason why cloud technology has been slow to get started was past concerns around security and questions around how you want to implement it. So there's a lot of, well, we'll let others do it first and we'd rather be a fast follower. What's interesting is in most institutions right now, going to the cloud is probably a more secure way of doing business than staying with your existing technology solutions. And that's because so much has been done to make the cloud secure, and because there's so many options as how to deploy the cloud that you can still control every element of deployment. It's interesting. A lot of people that are familiar with me know that in early 2020, I went to Shenzhen, China, and visited WeBank. What was unique about that visit was WeBank is probably the largest deployment of cloud technology and the largest digital bank in the world. When I visited WeBank, what was really unique was I went into their control room, and the control room had one whole wall filled with all kinds of things that are going on in instant availability. So you could see exactly how many transactions are happening, how many customers are being served. But over the corner was one screen that showed 4 different cloud deployments. What they believed was they always wanted to have a single and a backup for their regular customer transactions. They also had 2 cloud deployments that were mimicking their regular cloud, but was used for testing. So on an ongoing basis, they were testing different things in the marketplace, but using these parallel cloud technology solutions. What is interesting about that is the reason why they do it because the number of transactions was so massive, and the amount of data being collected was so important that they wanted to have access to it regularly and to have backups in place. Now, the importance of catching up with cloud technology now, there's a need for speed and scale. That is why people are going to the cloud, because it's easier to deploy, it's easier to capture information, it's easier to act on that information with a cloud deployment. So we have Seshika from WSO2, before we begin, can you talk a little bit about WSO2 and what your organization brings to the marketplace and how you differentiate yourself from others in the marketplace?
Sure. So WSO2 basically helps organizations with digital transformation. We service 700 plus customers across 90 countries. That's from 6 continents, and our customers come from all industries. But more than a quarter of our business comes from financial services, and that's why we have specialized services and functionality that is catering to financial services. So we basically help banks of all sizes in all regions, from global tier 1 banks to small building societies in different countries with their digital transformation needs. We've been specializing in API-led integration and identity management for about the last 2 decades. But our new product suite includes two aspects, actually, Choreo and Escadio, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later. But that particularly helps organizations with their cloud migration and cloud native development. Choreo is, in short, in summary, a cloud native internal development platform that helps organizations move to the cloud easily and quickly. And Escadio is an identity as a service product that helps organizations secure their applications by creating seamless login experiences on their cloud native applications. So that's basically the business that we're in. And obviously that gives us a lot of experience and interesting stories around cloud migrations and cloud native engineering that we've helped a lot of different types of organizations with.
So sticking with you, there's so many different ways. We did some research recently on cloud migration, and we saw so many different ways for financial institutions were using the cloud. Right now, is there one primary objective that financial institutions have as to why they're going to the cloud? And is there one area of the financial institution that probably is getting more attention than others?
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of reasons that are often cited, both by vendors as well as organizations that are actually doing cloud projects. It's almost like cloud is like a panacea to all ills for organizations that are digitally transforming themselves. You hear things like auto scaling or cutting costs or better resilience or better managing tech talent, delivering functionality at lightning speed, all of that. So these are all common objectives that we've heard our customers cite as the main purpose or the main motivation behind their cloud projects. But I think all of these things basically kind of come down to 2 things. I would say not one thing, but 2 things. And that's time and money, and they're connected as well. So how cloud really makes an impact on time and money is because of the infrastructure, right? So over the years, infrastructure has been sometimes a great hindrance for innovation, because you generally have to wait for weeks and months for infrastructure to be provisioned for your projects and for your functionality to actually be deployed. So cloud actually obviously gets rid of that hindrance and makes it possible to seamlessly use infrastructure as and when needed in the right quantity. And also, the cloud also allows organizations to use the latest available technology with zero infrastructure overhead. So due to these 2 reasons, I think, these main reasons, it's kind of obvious how the cloud helps with, reducing the time of deploying functionality into the market, and also reducing that cost of infrastructure, and also the management of that infrastructure, because usually managing infrastructure is done by very skilled and specialized tech talent that is now kind of scarce and often expensive. So in that way as well, the cloud really enables to reduce the cost of digital experiences and providing digital functionality out into the market. So I'd say time and money is the main underlying aspect that a lot of organizations are moving to the cloud for.
So Chris, before we talk about how you're implementing cloud technology at GoTyme, can you talk a little bit about who GoTyme is, but also about what your objective for moving forward with a cloud implementation was?
Yeah, so GoTyme is part of the Time Group. About 4 years ago, we built GoTyme Bank in South Africa, which was the first new bank in 20 years. And that was very much a cloud-based bank in South Africa. And we've since scaled that to 5 million customers there. So very rapid growth and really taking advantage of the cloud opportunities. And now I'm here as CTO of GoTyme. And we've taken our model from South Africa, and in partnership with the Conway family in the Manila, we've built a new bank, GoTyme, which again sort of takes the model that we had in South Africa, the technology, the approaches and the patterns, and trying to replicate it to become a multi-country bank, and I hope to extend that elsewhere as well.
So it's interesting, Seshika said it, and you've referenced it as well, is that this really gets down to speed and scalability. Never has there been a time when the need for speed is greater than it is today, the need for being able to access and deploy information, to be able to have tools at your disposal immediately. And cloud gives you that. In addition, the ability for scalability. Now, at GoTyme, you talked about the scale, that how fast you were growing as an organization, but even organizations that are not growing as fast, the amount of data that you're collecting is so much more than it was 1 year ago, 2 years ago, certainly 5 years ago. And our existing infrastructure is not set up in such a way that can handle this easily. So, Chris, excuse me, many organizations, as I mentioned at the beginning, were concerned about security issues related to external cloud implementations. They also are not sure necessarily where to start, and maybe even feel that their data is not ready to move to the cloud. And so when we ask organizations, what is your hesitation? Security is one. And number two is, it's just not right yet because our data is not ready. How did you get beyond these issues at GoTyme?
I think at the very beginning, it was something that concerned us, but I now look back and think if you haven't already done it, you're too late. You need to start running towards this and really tackling this as an organization. We deal with people's personal financial information, their identity itself. It's really sensitive information. And you can look at it and say, well, that's so sensitive that I'm the only one that can put my arms around it. When you're looking after family, when you're looking after your home, if you can touch it and see it and be there for it, you feel more secure. You feel you're doing the right thing. But it turns out that, in actual fact, giving that data over to somebody who can manage it far better than I can, to put it in the cloud, the cloud sort of buzz we use, they have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of engineers looking at security problems, looking at scaling problems. I could only, on my best day, have 5 engineers looking at something, not those thousands. So, really a mindset shift around just because I can see it, touch it, feel it, that doesn't make it more secure. Can I sort of put things elsewhere where others will have a much better chance of managing it than I ever would? In our considerations as well, there's quite a lot of regulatory sort of aspects to this. And for us, we spent a fair bit of time initially thinking around different options, what we could do in our own cloud and other clouds. And it really became clear to us that we were almost like compromising the opportunity ourselves. Because if we went forward and said, well, we can do a little bit in the cloud, a little bit out of the cloud, we were only doing that because the conversation was going to be easier with perhaps the regulator, the compliance, the audit team. But it really wasn't the answer. And as we listed everything that we had to do and all the controls we needed to put in place, it really became obvious just that putting forward an idea that we would do better really wasn't true. And so, that helped us step back a little bit and pushed us to say, well, let's push to put everything in the cloud. Let's really start to explore and take advantage of the controls, the processes, the things that we, as a smaller organization, because we may have 5 million customers, but we're a very small sort of company. And how can we make maximum advantage of the larger organizations around us?
So, it's interesting because you bring up all these issues. You are an early adopter to the cloud scenario. So really, any institution that follows you, both in the financial industry and financial services industry and other industries, really benefit from your experiences, which is another advantage of WSO2, is that you have the ability to build on experiences of others and make it so that we get through some of these hurdles based on previous deployments. Seshika, when you're in the field selling the cloud solutions, what are the normal hesitations that firms have? Those that have knocked on your door, so to speak, have already made the decision that they want to go to the cloud. But what holds them back from fully implementing it, or from maybe just dipping their toe in the water? What have you seen overall as being why organizations run slower to the cloud deployment than what you would think they'd do?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's interesting to kind of look at the different sort of, hesitations or concerns from different types of banks and financial institutions. In Chris's case, I think is quite lucky because it's a digital bank. So sometimes you don't have to deal with some of that, legacy tech, as well as legacy thinking and legacy, legacy processes that many of our clientele actually have to deal with. And also some organizations actually have to really battle it out with, regulatory concerns, because some of the countries are not as progressive as the rest are towards things like moving to the cloud. So I think for banking and financial services, especially, regulatory concerns and governance aspects, like internal governance aspects, is something that we commonly hear. And then, of course, the security aspect is definitely a very common concern. And when Chris was talking about, the way he presented, how the security aspects are handled in the cloud as opposed to in within your organization, within your tech talent, I was actually thinking about banking itself. Why do we entrust banks with our finances? Why can't we keep it at home and invest it ourselves? We do it because we know that the banks are better at handling it. They're specialized in doing that, and they're regulated, and they have certain responsibilities and regulations to follow and expertise. So moving to the cloud is much like that, because from a security aspect, rather than trying to do it ourselves and really being able to touch and feel the data and everything on premise, sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith and hand it over to larger organizations that actually have lots of different teams and experts working on improving security and resilience of such deployments. So that's, sorry, I know I'm digressing, but it was an interesting thought that occurred to me when Chris said that. And I think the other most commonly cited issue is data privacy and data residency. So a lot of organizations, a lot of incumbent traditional banks that have not been on the cloud is quite nervous about moving data into the cloud. So the fact that you're not now controlling that makes especially CIOs and CISOs a bit nervous. But obviously these are all challenges that we've commonly heard and commonly helped organizations overcome. So certainly not anything that we haven't heard before or helped organizations in overcoming to move to the cloud.
You bring up a very important point, and it's interesting because in a lot of the webinars that I do and podcasts that I have, people get concerned about certain things, and as a financial institution executive myself in the past, I remember many times going, but we're different. I know you've done this with other organizations, but we're different. But the reality is, especially with cloud implementations, there's a huge component of implementation that is replicated organization after organization after organization. And a firm like WSO2, who's worked with so many financial institutions and organizations outside of financial services, which is important, I'd say about 80% of implementations tend to be standard. And I don't mean standard in the fact that they're easy or anything like that, but the reality is you're replicating what's already happened, and you're building from cloud or what I'd say, the knowledge of other organizations almost from a crowdsourced basis, but saying that, what, we've gone through these before, here's how we've addressed them, which makes it, getting back to your first comments when we talked, the speed and scalability of what you're implementing, that you can implement it faster because this is not your first financial institution, whoever you work with. So, we talked about in a pre-call, the fact that despite all the things we try to achieve, there are some challenges that happen even in early cloud implementations and even mature cloud projects. What are some of the strategies to overcome these that WSO2 helps with?
Yeah, sure. I just want to, affirm that, these problems are common, even though they may come from, larger organizations like global tier ones. And sometimes, they're the same kind of hesitations or concerns for the, smallest building society we worked with. So yes, they are quite common, and it's very easy to help organizations with them. In addition to stuff that we've heard from customers and the challenges that they've had, I'd also like to kind of talk about the survey that Jim mentioned in the introduction that we did with the American Bank, where we surveyed over 100 financial institutions around their strategies of developing cloud capabilities. And when we inquired about their top technology challenges in general for banks and financial institutions, the most significant challenge that was quoted was cloud migration. Second was talent, and third was data. So cloud migration is right up there on everyone's mind, and that's what's kind of keeping many CTOs up at night. So I think when we talk especially about banks and financial institutions that have not been on the cloud, so they're not cloud native and are now trying to migrate to the cloud, basically one of the first issues is the resources. So do we really understand how to do cloud native engineering when we've been doing on-premise engineering and on-premise deployments and managing that on-premise for the last so many years? So that sometimes the applications that are being moved to the cloud need re-engineering before it can be successfully migrated to the cloud. So those kinds of things are usually when you start getting into the projects and you go kind of one step ahead, and you go past these initial security concerns and data privacy concerns. Those are the kinds of complexities that are often that we often meet when we work with customers. And that's where actually I think cloud native development platforms become very useful and very kind of helpful in overcoming that, because it can then remove that complexity of cloud native development and help organizations and tech teams to just focus on the business logic and programming the functionality, while the platform orchestrates the rest of it. And which is really the bit that really requires specialized tech skills, which is scarce and expensive. So if you can work with an organization and a product that helps orchestrate that cloud native development, then it doesn't become so daunting and complex.
Chris, when you implemented the cloud and you've probably done a few cloud implementations within your organization, what are the areas of your organization where you've used the cloud to date?
We use cloud everywhere. I mean, it's there for storage, it's there for security, we use it for monitoring, we use it for business logic. We've gone from sort of infrastructure components through to sort of hosted cloud features and functions. We very much move from the typical infrastructure as a service where you're just looking at tin to actual sort of outcomes and features that you can get from a number of the cloud providers today who've moved further and further up the chain. So for us as a bank, I mean, we are a pure cloud bank. And so everything we implemented uses either either something that we've implemented in the cloud, or we work with partners who always work and offer their services to us through the cloud as well. So very much sort of nothing untouched. That world is moving pretty fast as well. I mean, this is only in the last couple of years that we've really transformed from infrastructure service to serverless, and goodness knows what's coming next as some of these more and more is done by other parties in this whole sort of chain. And I think that trend is certainly sort of seems to continue. The features themselves get richer. The work that you have to do as a company gets less and less. And it's not just worrying about not having to have an infrastructure engineer. Now I can have fewer telco engineers, fewer sort of actual, through the other services that are offered, sort of fewer people in other areas each time as well, and normally at a lower unit cost as well.
So, Chris, I'm gonna have you put on the hat of somebody from WSO2. And if you were going out there and trying to talk to a financial institution about implementing cloud technology, number one, where would you tell them to start if they just wanted to get their toes wet? They weren't a digital bank completely right now. They're just wanting to test the waters. But more importantly, what benefits that you've seen would you push to them and say, this is why you've got to do it?
I think that any CTO in any organization wants more sleep. And that's what all our developers want. It's all my teams want. So our management team would like more sleep, more time to do more things. And I certainly think that having the cloud has given us more sleep. There are a whole range of things that we found that we don't have to do. Like I don't have to have an infrastructure sort of heavy sort of team. I don't have to have a team doing the logistics of buying a service, shipping it across the world, and putting it into a rack somewhere. All of these sort of activities have really made things a lot easier and a lot better for us. When there's an incident, and I need some extra capacity, or I need to quickly go and test something because we've got a feeling that if we make a tweak that the performance of something will get better, we can do that in minutes. Previously that would have taken hours, if not days. And how many hours sleep are you losing over those sort of matters? How much time are you losing with your family, friends, everything else you're trying to do? So I really would sort of say that you really will get a lot of benefits in the speed of execution, the speed of change. We've certainly recovered from incidents, so things don't always work as they should. And one of the reasons we've recovered quickly is because we've been able to increase capacity during the moment where we've got a problem, buys us time to diagnose the true fault, fix it, and then reduce the capacity. And that didn't cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. It cost me probably an extra $10 for the evening to sort of up the capacity and then bring it back down again. And you just don't get that flexibility if you're not in the cloud. It's impossible to replicate. So I really feel strong that those things are really sort of good, strong outcomes. And certainly some of the learnings we've had in being in the cloud, let alone, you mentioned data earlier. I certainly found that a lot more cloud-friendly vendors exist than they did sort of 3 or 4 years ago. And very much so, they're now more adept at sharing their logs, sharing what's going on, giving more insight into their products. And that level of sharing has increased as well. So again, once you're in the cloud, it's easy to share things across the cloud. It's not, I kind of find that with products like WSO2, it makes it a bit easier to bridge between multiple clouds with multiple vendors as well. That's sort of a bit of a hidden tax sometimes. You sort of think you're in the cloud and it's all easy and you bring everything together. But when, like us, we work with perhaps about 9 or 10 significant sort of cloud vendors bringing their product together to offer as a bank. And we have to connect them in different ways, in different security contexts, different connections. And so using other products help us bridge that gap, using knowledge that other people have built before, different secure connection methods, different bits of code that have been built together and seen working in practice elsewhere. And every time you sort of get a chance to reuse one of these things or implement something in the cloud is saving you time, and it most likely is saving you cost as well.
It's interesting, Chris, because we keep on getting back to saving money, saving time, and being able to access and have flexibility in implementation. When I visited WeBank, I think one of the things that stuck with me, I still quote it quite often, we've done some interviews with the executives of WeBank, is that they said the cloud technology gave them the ability to go from ideation to implementation in 14 days. Now, I don't know of a financial institution out there that has an innovation process that's that quick. However, it's only available if you have cloud technology backing you up. This can't be done in a legacy environment because you just can't access data that quickly. What's also important, and you just brought it up, is the whole data aspect. We're not getting less data, we're getting more data. And the more information we have on every one of our clients, every one of our customers, it's becoming more important every day. But if you don't have access to that data, if you don't have the availability on an instant to be able to access it, you can't respond to the consumer's needs in the time period that they want it to be. You know, one thing that's come out of COVID is customer expectations have risen exponentially. They demand for you as an organization to know about them as a person or a company more than ever before and faster than ever before. It used to be that I'd go into my financial institution and I'd get completely frustrated by something that I know didn't make sense to me because I'm a banker by trade and I know they can do better. Well, now every consumer knows what's possible. They see it from their retailers. They see it from their grocery stores. They see it from their entertainment venues, you know, the streaming technology that they have, that they know that you have access to insights about them that they may have given to you just seconds ago. And so what's important to realize as we implement this is the consumer's frustration for you not being able to access what they know that you know about them quickly and easily is unacceptable to a consumer. As you mentioned, it's also unacceptable to internal employees. You know, internal employees now, their experience at your company has never been more important. The only way you keep the talent that you want is to be at the forefront of what's available technology-wise. And you brought up in your last answer that my employees expect the accessibility of data, of insights, of changes in the organization in an instant. And if you don't provide that, you could lose that employee, or you may not get a new employee that you need. And there's never been a time when the ability to get good talent has been more important, and the ability to develop, the ability to access, all this is made possible through the cloud. You know, when you look at the future right now around cloud technology and what's going to be possible, what excites you?
Well, there's a bit of a shift happening at the moment in, I've seen a fair few things in AI and cloud recently. And this is, I mean, specifically in the developer space. So there seems to be more tools out there to help developers do their coding faster and better, doing quality checks for them, seeing how they're doing in their code, building the right things in the first place. And that's like a very basic level of thing. But then you look inside the platforms that we run and look inside, I mean, some of the cloud providers we use, and they can self-diagnose through the patterns that they've seen from thousands of other companies, whether or not we might be about to have a problem or not. So we've got some alerts that set up now that say, if they see this sort of pattern, alert us so that we can do something. Now those alerts are getting even more sophisticated, because now some of them are saying, well, we're not just going to alert you, we actually know that it's probable that we need to restart this service or we need to add some capacity. And this isn't something that I've necessarily had to build and add and learn the rules myself. These are the rules being suggested to me within some of the products we've been using recently. And this is really sort of making everyone's life easier, able to focus our time and energy on the things that are really important. So I think that sort of expansion of that type of, I guess, that hive mind knowledge that's come from everyone else's problems that you can sort of embed inside into your systems is pretty exciting. I think the second area we've seen, we ourselves have done a lot of growth in serverless, sort of decoupling components and really massively increasing reliability of platforms by making sure that a failure in one doesn't impact another one. And we used to do that. It would literally be product A would fail and product B wouldn't have a knock on. But we're able to do that at a much smaller scale now. And serverless has actually helped us do that, because it's kind of forced us to make sure that we're building smaller components, we're isolating things in different ways. You know, we actually have a boundary of what it's meant to do already drawn for us. And so we have to design to make sure that that component keeps working. So yeah, it's in a lot of sort of, and that's helped us a lot. So I think those two areas are pretty exciting. And They constantly seem to be changing. I think we did our design for the bank 4 years ago, and then it would have been another year till we implemented it, had it already. And then a year later, we were going, well, we seem to have built a load of legacy, and we didn't realize, like, we have to be able to adapt quickly enough to pick up the new technologies and actually replace what we poured our hearts into to build only 2 years ago, and be confident to say, yep, now's the time to start rebuilding it, because the whole world is moving on so quickly, and cloud gives us that chance to grab that.
Well, and you brought up earlier, and so did Seshika, that the ability to be flexible and to take advantage of opportunities that are out there in an instant. You know, every organization in the US and other countries had a situation during COVID that government benefit programs came to the marketplace very quickly. And we were all remote, and we all had to build something that we didn't even imagine 24 hours before that. That was made easier by those organizations that had cloud technology that could build things instantly and deploy them without having to worry about legacy infrastructure or have to put together things that don't match together in order to put a product out there. So, you know, one of the decisions organizations, financial institutions have as they look to cloud implementation is what type of cloud implementation to use, be it internal, external, hybrid, private. How did you make that determination yourselves?
Well, I think in our case, a little bit of there's a lot of sort of regulatory discussion around this one. So initially, all of our discussion focused about what we could and couldn't do. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, that became the wrong sort of discussion for us. You know, rather than sort of saying, well, what do we think we're allowed to do? We needed to go back to the beginning and say, well, what are the best things for us to do? And the easy answer was going to be, you know, hybrid, because everyone would have been comfortable. But the best answer we found in the end was external cloud, because you just can't tap into the full range of benefits unless you go that way. And any other answer is a bit of a compromise, even though some countries, some regulations sort of do sort of enforce more of either an internal cloud or hybrid cloud. I haven't really personally felt very comfortable with some of the internal clouds. The technology is there, but yeah, are you really giving yourself the maximum ability to scale when you need to? Are you giving yourself the ability to take advantage of new features as they come out? Probably not, because you're relying on someone else's probably much smaller scale cloud. Perhaps you're working with a telco to give you an internal cloud, and then really, you know, they're kind of getting a virtual machine sort of based expansion. So you're not really getting true horizontal and vertical scaling. And so internal cloud has always sort of been put off, let alone trying to think you're going to build your own internal cloud, which I always think is one of the worst conversations. It's sort of like you're really getting yourself, you just renamed your data center an internal cloud. Those are kind of the worst ones for me. And so we very much ended up pushing for full sort of external cloud. And I just can't get 100,000 engineers looking at a security problem unless you're working with one of those organizations who offer you that this is the widget that works, and we've seen it working with all our other clients. And if it doesn't work for some reason because something else comes out, then we've got the skills, the knowledge globally to sort of make a tweak. And I think we've had quite a few examples of this where there's been, you know, global security threats and vulnerabilities announced, and then all we've had to do is do a quick inventory and audit to see, you know, where we're using those components. And by the time we've done the inventory, it's really typical that the cloud providers already made the update, and sort of our inventory is looking a bit like, well, you know, thanks very much, but we probably didn't need to do the inventory. We probably could have got that sent to us automatically via the inventory tool in the cloud provider the next day, and not had to worry about it. So yeah, I think you really have to sort of think about biting the bullet, even in the high, you know, the high threat sort of data privacy industries, or health, banking are important ones, but there are so many controls that you can put in place that, again, you don't necessarily have to manage. You know, plus, if you feel really uncomfortable, you can put secondary controls in place. It is possible to back things up out of the cloud and put them somewhere else if you feel really uncomfortable. I'd question what you're really going to gather, really going to gain if you really coldly look at the risk and the outcome that you want. So I'd always push for the full cloud.
You know, Seshika, as organizations look to implement new technologies as part of their digital transformation journey, a lot of organizations say, how long is this going to take? How long is it going to take to implement? And can I do it in smaller packets? So if an organization is coming to you and say, okay, we haven't done anything in the cloud up to now, what would you suggest to them? Number one, from the area of where do you focus? How do you break this big thing down into smaller parts? And how long would it take them to put the first leg of the stool in as far as cloud implementation?
Yeah. So essentially, it's kind of a mind shift change as well that organizations need to get used to, because organizations that haven't been working on the cloud are generally used to larger projects, big projects that take a long time, because obviously, the provisioning of infrastructure and, testing and deployment takes such a long time. So you don't want to do that in small chunks. You put everything together and push out a big piece of functionality, that takes a couple of months or sometimes years. So essentially, when organizations really come to us and ask, how long is this going to take? The answer that we give has to be actually taken from a mind shift change that, cloud native engineering is completely different. Cloud native engineering means, putting out little pieces of functionality and new experiences very quickly, because you just can do that. And that's also how, you kind of, provide for this insatiable demand of experiences by the customers these days, because they want everything so quickly. I've got married now. My requirements are different. I've bought my new house now. Don't offer me mortgages. So that speed, the change of that speed is actually a mind shift change. So I just want to mention that when you think about cloud native products and projects, we say deliver in hours, using our technology. That is what we want our customers to do, because you just can. But obviously, to deliver in hours or deliver in days instead of weeks and months, along with that mind shift change, you also need to kind of scope these different chunks that are coming out properly. And you have to also kind of think about, okay, who's going to take this on now? Like, are the business teams ready to go live with this now that the technology has kind of beaten them to it? Are the business teams ready to answer the questions and go ahead with it? Have the bank received regulatory clearance and governance clearance? Because suddenly things are coming out so fast that you didn't anticipate that the technology or the functionality to be ready before you went through that whole regulatory clearance process or whatever. So those are some of the new things that banks have to kind of deal with when they start working, with cloud, when they start getting comfortable with cloud native engineering.
What's interesting too, and talking about that same subject, is even the best laid plans don't always work as we think they're going to. Not from a working standpoint, but from implementation. When you're working with financial institutions specifically, what are the main reasons why implementations may take longer than what you and the client may have perceived?
I think, especially when it comes to cloud migration, and cloud migration happens to, organizations that are not currently on the cloud. The main reason is what I mentioned. It's the mind. It's a mind shift, right? The mindset shift, because you're not used to, technology working that fast. So you don't anticipate, what is required. You don't have the resources, the relevant resources ready sometimes to help with the different phases of a project so fast. So I think it's mainly the understanding of how agile this is really.
Yeah.
And basically aligning these different aspects of a bank or a financial institution to kind of create and innovate in that speed is I think it all boils down to that.
Yeah.
And especially, I mean, Chris mentioned things like AI powered, how AI really enables the development. I mean, that's not even in the future. It is there now. It's in, as Chris mentioned, like he has seen it, used it. We provide that in our technology, and those kinds of things really. Not only does it like take away the. Not only does cloud take away the time that is usually spent on deployment and testing and all of that, not only does it cut that down, but even the actual implementation or even the actual programming of the functionality is much faster now because of things like AI powered development and engineering. So that speed at which this is now coming out is usually I mean, it's a great problem to have. But that's usually what banks originally kind of find very difficult to keep up with.
Chris, we talked about implementations don't always work the way we think they're going to. There's hiccups, there's things that are done. You've been on the cutting edge of deploying cloud. As you look back and put in perspective what's possible today versus what may not have been possible even 2 years ago, as you look back, what would you possibly have done differently in your implementation today if you had to do it again?
I think there's a couple of things probably we would have done differently. I think one of them actually is that cloud moves very fast. So one thing we didn't do so well in the first year was that we probably had a little bit of mentality of sort of building as if we were building a system that wasn't in the cloud. And we didn't notice that in all of our design. So, and it took us maybe a year and a half to sort of realize that and then start to sort of unpick it and really sort of be working in the cloud. So I think I wish that we'd actually dedicated a bit more capacity to sort of that continued horizon scanning. I think we were probably so pleased to get the first sort of implementation off the ground that we were really trying to sort of thinking that we were just tuning that and keeping that working. When the real value would have been to keep experimenting with little things on the side. Can we change the microservices stack that we've got? Can we implement, all these new things that in our case, Amazon are anything daily that we can never keep up with, but little nuggets of things that keep coming out. So definitely would have advocated more to sort of have a little bit of capacity just to keep doing those things and testing things, especially as at that point we knew we had the opportunity to do small scale tests in amongst everything else that we were doing. So that definitely would be one thing I would have tweaked. The other thing would be we were probably fortunate to get onto this in the first year, but we probably should have realized it earlier because we'd seen other experiences like this where a cost can actually run away from you. It's not the same model as you're used to. And that if you don't keep an eye on cost every day, then cloud costs can sort of spiral. And it can be silly things like you now have the opportunity to turn off your development environment between midnight and 4 a.m. when your developers aren't developing. That's going to save you money. Right. If a implementation has mistakenly left something on, those costs can keep ticking over. And I can't necessarily expect every developer to sort of necessarily realize that they've done that, or every implementation team to realize they've done something. So I would have earlier, I would say now always, make sure that you've got a role somewhere in your organization where somebody is looking at cost frequently and often and looking at the reports that are there, that are available to you, seeing what the trending is, doing some projections, and making sure that you're not waking up one month and then we saw sort of what was a straight line 1 month, and then the third month it sort of went up, and I thought that must have been just an odd tweak, and then we're sort of thinking, no, this is a hockey stick. We need to get on this because this is going to ruin our year.
It's interesting, Chris, because it gets down to and the cloud is such an open field type situation. It really gets down to, what do we need versus what can we do? You bring up a very simple way of looking at Just because we can have the development world on 24/7 doesn't mean we should have it on 24/7. And, the cloud's that open field that says anything is possible, which is entirely true, but should it be? It's kind of like that pre-planning effort that said, two things can happen. Number one, you don't want to build the cloud to replicate what you have internally today from a legacy financial institution. Building things in the cloud that is done exactly the same way you did before is not a good path forward. But on the other hand, building it with an open field where anybody can do anything they want creates another problem, which makes it so that it costs more, it takes longer, and things can get out of control more than just cost, but from a developmental standpoint, can certainly get out of control with regard to where your actual objectives are being met. So, that's an extraordinarily important point to say, keep an eye on things. Now, that sounds logical, but the problem is if you have a bunch of developers that are getting all jazzed about this new technology, this new capability, everybody wants to have everything, even though we don't necessarily need it. And you have to you still set parameters and find out where you move from there. Make sure you get the basics done right before you move to the next thing. And Seshika, on the same subject, we're in a situation right now where the economy is questionable. The ability to get new talent is tough. You have people that are already overwhelmed by what they're doing today to keep up with what's going on. How does WSO2 help financial institutions get over those hurdles? How do you partner with organizations to make it so they don't have to carry as much of the load themselves?
Yeah, Jim, the promise of cloud is, saving time and money, right? But the ironic thing is to get from where you are to a point where the cloud is actually saving time and money for you, usually requires that itself. It does require time and money because you need expertise, highly skilled people and people who know, cloud native engineering really well to actually take you from where you are to that place. And then you can start saving money.
Right.
So that's quite ironic, right? So I think that's really where organizations like ourselves can be kind of used, and that's what we really offer our customers, to really make that journey easy and to basically provide that expertise and also the products, the technology to make that journey so easy and simple. So if you look at very quickly, if you look at our technology, like for example Choreo, which is a cloud native internal development platform, we basically make it very easy to migrate from legacy or from on-prem to the cloud. I mean, like we offer like more than 700 APIs to common SaaS applications. We provide side-by-side pro code and low code versions, so that we enable our customers to kind of build their cloud native applications irrespective of their tech team skill level. So if you're very highly skilled, then you can use pro code, but if you're not, you can use low code. We provide multi-cloud support, data mapping tools, AI powered engineering, all kinds of things that really, the technology really makes it easy to migrate to the cloud. And then the other part, and I think the best part, is that we've done this time and time again with customers on thousands of projects, and we bring that expertise to our customers, and they can kind of avail themselves of that expertise. The mistakes that have been made and how we overcame them, the common challenge, they're really common, to really kind of help organizations through it. So it's not as daunting as you would think it is if you have the right kind of help and support from technology and consultants that have already been there, done that, helped thousands of organizations do it. So I think in a nutshell, that's what we provide. We help organizations move to the cloud and thrive in the cloud, so that they don't require time and money to kind of actually benefit from the cloud.
Boy, this time has gone so fast. We have so much more we can discuss, but we have some questions from our audience today, and I know we aren't going to be able to get to all of them. But Amber, can we have the first question?
Sure, we certainly can. Thanks so much, Jim. So as Jim mentioned, if we don't get to your question during the session, somebody from the WSO2 team will reach out to you. So no worries there. So the first question is, can the already stretched technology teams at small and medium banks hope to make all the right decisions towards their cloud strategy?
I think I'll take that.
Yeah, that's probably yours.
Okay. So probably not. Because making the right decisions toward a cloud strategy is it does require a certain amount of expertise or a certain amount of knowledge about cloud native engineering and how the cloud providers work, and how best to use that functionality. But obviously the part that the tech teams actually can contribute with, and is easy for them to contribute with, is the knowledge of their own architecture, right? When you take a bank's or a financial institution's architecture, you know that there are certain things that are easier to move to the cloud than some other things that might be much more legacy than some of the newer applications or services that they work with. So I think if you really pair a small or medium-sized bank with a technology company like ours, then I think you have the winning formula, because you have the tech teams providing the knowledge that they already have about their architecture. And then you have the support of the technology, as well as the consultants, to really, together make the right decisions, to, really come up with a really good cloud strategy and a cloud migration strategy that can really help, your organization, as unique as it is, to really understand, what to move first, how to move that, what to do with the difficult ones, etc. So if you were trying to do it alone, I think it would be a bit of a stretch, but certainly there are organizations that can help you with it.
Okay, great. So this one sounds like it's for Chris. So does operating in the cloud enable you as a digital bank to really compete with the large incumbents that have very large assets and large customer bases that have been acquired over the years? If so, do you have an example of that for our audience?
Definitely. Those incumbent banks typically have very large staffs, large organizations. They've got a lot of experience and knowledge themselves. Effectively using the cloud and these other platforms, I'm sort of taking a shortcut. I'm able to benefit because that knowledge is freely, those systems and that knowledge is freely available to us. So just by sort of being part of the cloud, I'm taking advantage of a massive ecosystem of that's going to accelerate my team's knowledge faster than having worked in a large organization, having access to thousands of engineers sort of there for us straight away. I also think it gives the team like us a cost advantage. We were able to do things at a much lower operating cost because we didn't have to incur the large upfront costs that have typically been associated with incumbent sort of banks and other organizations. And again, that's a shortcut for us because the less capital we spend, the more money we can spend on other more exciting and innovative features. We actually, unusually, I think for most organizations, we dramatically reduced our first year costs whilst increasing our volumes. I think we added 1 million customers, and because of the redesign work we did, we were able to actually reduce our costs over that year quite significantly from month to month. And we actually continue to do that in other years. And I think that being in the cloud means that you have the option when the larger incumbents still have that massive fixed heavy yearly cost that they can't go under. They're always stuck sort of, operating at a cost of X, and we can go below that just by making tweaks and changes. So I really think it helps us compete.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is going to be our last question here. So it sounds like it's one's for Seshika, but if anyone else has comments on it, feel free to jump in. But does the cloud provide options to work with or around a legacy core and still achieve the type of digital experiences that organizations with digital cores provide?
Sounds like they're asking whether the cloud provides lipstick on the pig. So, I mean, that's what we used to say, right? Like, you can, it's not just the cloud. I mean, you can come up with, various workarounds, integration and API magic to build an abstraction around, the legacy core and enable a legacy core to kind of, provide, various things that it, natively can't. But I think if you're a bank or a financial institution that wants to be in business beyond the next 3 to 5 years, then irrespective of the workarounds that are available, a legacy code just won't do. Because if you look at the rate at which global and personal requirements change, a legacy code just cannot deliver at that pace. So I think it's imperative that banks set a goal to move towards a modern cloud core within the next 3 to 5 years at least, because a legacy core is not made to deal with that kind of demand that the current, customers and the general, the retail and corporate customers expect. So you may not want to experiment with trying to stress a legacy core into providing that kind of demand by doing workarounds, because that will definitely not provide the ability to give that kind of digital experience that the digital cores can. And also you're just messing with fire, trying to do 10x of what a legacy core is supposed to be doing.
It's interesting, real quickly as we end up, Chris and Seshika said the same thing basically, is that when you're looking at new technologies, in this case the cloud, the last thing you want to do is replicate old ways of doing things, because just doing them faster is not good enough. You have to rethink the entire process. As Chris mentioned also, you got to compartmentalize these things as well, so you don't get out of control as far as what can be done, because that lengthens the process and also makes it very costly. So I think, again, what you're really doing is setting up a good plan up front, which WSO2 can really help with, because they've worked with so many financial institutions in cloud implementation. They can help you make it so that you're doing it at the pace and the stage that you should be doing for your organization. But I'll tell you right now, a lot of organizations are cutting back on expenses and on investments because of the possibility and the challenges of the economy as we see it. The reality is this is one area where you really can't wait on. It doesn't get easier the longer you wait. And at the end of the day, cloud technology has the ability to pay for itself from an implementation basis. So again, thank you both for being on the webinar today. And I hope our audience got a lot out of it.
Yes, thank you so much to our panel, and of course, WSO2 for sponsoring today's insightful webinar. Just as a follow-up note, everyone who's joined us today is going to receive an on-demand link to view this webinar, so please feel free to share that with your teams. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.